Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Talk about a topic and a person that we have talked about a lot over the last 6 months, but not much over probably the last month or so. That is Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and the Colorado Buffaloes. Obviously, part of the reason we just haven't hit on Coach Prime as much, a little bit of a slower time of year, not as much news to consume. And beyond that, obviously, there's also other stuff going on off the field with Coach Prime that has kind of kept him out of the spotlight. Most notably, some health issues. Obviously, there was a major foot surgery. We were afraid it was going to be worse than it was. Glad to know that he's okay. He is recovering and all of that. But as we get closer to the season, we're going to certainly be talking about everybody more, but also certainly the Colorado Buffaloes as well, because they're just a fascinating program, a lightning rod program, and one that everybody has an opinion on. Well, over the course of the holiday weekend, I saw a very interesting opinion from one Pac-12 coach, and here's kind of the context behind it, okay? So preseason magazines are out. It's magazine season, right? They start coming out usually late May, early June, around Memorial Day. And over the weekend, I did see something very interesting, a quote from an anonymous Pac-12 coach. Again, if you've read those magazines, you know that as part of the scouting report of every team, they poll a coach or two in your conference to get their perspective. So I want to talk about what the coach said about Coach Prime, because like everybody else, he certainly has some strong opinions, although in the case of whomever this is, and it is anonymous, I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't agree, but let me get into the quotes, okay? So this is what one anonymous coach said about Coach Prime and Colorado football. It feels like a lose-lose for Colorado with Prime. Either he's going to be really good, really fast, and leave for another gig, which looking at that roster doesn't seem possible. The alternative is that they're going to be bad and they'll end up firing him in a big circus. Jackson State was so good because they could get FBS level players and beat on FCS level rosters. That won't happen here. They're not a good roster right now. How does he handle losing big? We have not seen that. All right, so let's get into some of those quotes. And let me just say this. Listen, everybody is entitled to their opinion. Everybody, I don't generally criticize opinions, but I will say this about this particular opinion. I disagree with just about every single word that is in that quote, courtesy of Athlon Sports, about Coach Prime and Colorado. Let's break it down. Let's talk about it, because I just basically disagree with everything that this anonymous coach said. All right, so first of all, let's get to the first part, where he talked about the possibility that it feels like, before we even get in too deep into the quote, let's start with this. He calls it a lose-lose situation for Colorado. Right there, before he says anything else, I vehemently disagree with what this coach said. Here's why. It's not a lose-lose situation for Colorado. As a matter of fact, this has been about the best case scenario for Colorado possible. We've spent more time talking about Colorado from early December to early July now. So what is that, a 7-month period? We've spent more time talking about Colorado in that 7-month period than we have probably talked about Colorado football on a national scale in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. There has not been this much interest in Colorado football since the mid-1990s, when they had Cordell Stewart and Michael Westbrook and Rashaan Salam. It has been a really, really long time since we have talked this much about Colorado football. And so don't give me it's a lose-lose situation. It's a win-win situation, because even before he has ever coached a game, he has quite literally, and I include myself in this, use the word literally too much and not in the actual term it's supposed to be used, but he has quite literally created more interest in Colorado football in 7 months than has been interest in probably 25 years for that program. So it's not lose-lose, but let's break down the quote from there. Let's start with he could be really, really good, really fast, and leave for another gig. I disagree with that. Now, listen, is there a scenario where the perfect job opens up and he can't say no? I think that perfect job would probably be Colorado, but maybe it is one of the not Colorado, Florida State. Florida State to me is probably the one that's like dream job, alma mater, whatever. But even remember about 3-4 years ago when Mike Norvell got the job, they interviewed Coach Prime and turned him down. So I don't think there's like this huge list of schools that Coach Prime is just using Colorado for a stepping stone as. He said it very publicly. Listen, this program believed in me when nobody else in the FBS did. When nobody else wanted to give me a shot, Colorado did, and I am forever indebted to them. So I don't think that means that he's necessarily going to be coaching there until the day he retires. But I don't think he sees this as a stepping stone either, and he's ready to leave, and he wants to leave, and all that good stuff. Beyond that, let's think about this. And this is something I keep talking about on this show because I think it's important. I don't think people understand how fundamentally college football is about to change with a 12-team playoff, not this coming fall, but the following one. Here's why. Let's go with that quote. He's going to be really good, really fast, and leave for another gig. Well, if he's really good, really fast, let's say he shocks everybody and wins 8 games this year. And then let's say he wins 10 or 11 in year 2. Not saying it will happen. I'm just going off this quote. If Coach Prime in Colorado win 10 games in year 2, you know what's going to happen? I can say with most certainty, he's going to make the college football playoff. Like, is no one paying attention? Like, everyone talks about, oh, this coach is this and that coach is that. Here's the bottom line. In 1 year from now, 3 times as many teams are going to make college football's championship event, the college football playoff. And it's going to change the sport in ways that nobody is considering. So if Coach Prime shocks everybody, not shocks everybody because he's not going to shock me, but if he's better than people think, faster than people think, he's going to be in the playoff. He's going to have a chance to compete for a championship. And so then at that point, what is the rush? Now, listen, if he was at a conference where there was zero chance that he could get in other than getting an automatic bid, remember that college football playoff is going to have 6 auto bids, 6 at-large bids, then it's a different deal. But Colorado's either going to be in the Pac-12 or the Big 12, and I think they might be in the Big 12 by the time the first college football playoff comes around, or the first 12-team playoff comes around. But at the same time, beyond that, keep this in mind. If he finishes second in the Pac-12, second in the Big 12, 10 wins, 11 wins, he will be in the playoff. There's going to be 6 at-large bids. They're not all going to the SEC. And as we've learned time and time again, the people who make decisions on this college football playoff, they understand it's a made-for-TV event. And there would be no bigger event than if Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes were running through the tunnel there. So there's that part of the conversation. Now let's get to the second part of the conversation of if he's really, really, really bad, they would have to fire him. This is the second part of that quote. It feels like a lose-lose for Colorado. Either he's going to be really good, really fast and leave for another gig. The alternative is that they're going to be bad and they'll end up firing him in a big circus. Well, listen, I'll say this. I don't think Coach Prime is going to be bad. But let's work under the scenario that he is. Aren't we talking about 4, 5, 6 years down the road? Like the idea that if it flops, that they're going to immediately fire him, I don't believe it. Because again, it's exactly what I just said. He has created more interest in this program than ever before. He has created leverage and opportunity for himself, and he has an AD that believes in him. And so I believe that AD is going to stick with him through thick and thin for a couple different reasons. The most important one being this. He is making Colorado more interesting and relevant than they've ever been. So it's one thing if you're struggling and you're not recruiting well, you're not interesting, you're not creating buzz, and most importantly, you're not selling tickets to games, you're not getting donations, all that good stuff. If that happens, then yeah, you're going to get fired. You're going to be Carl Durrell, or you're going to be one of the many other coaches who have failed the last couple years at Colorado, last couple decades at Colorado, really. But he is going to be given a longer leash because honestly, like, what's the alternative? I don't think he's going to fail, but let's talk about the scenario where he does fail. You're going to give him a longer leash because what's the alternative? Go out and hire some random offensive coordinator that nobody knows and nobody cares about? Some defensive coordinator, some mid-major head coach, some group of 5 head coach that nobody knows? You're not going to do that because it's not going to create the interest. It's not going to create the buzz. So he is going to get a longer leash. And I believe Colorado, if he struggles, and I don't believe that he will, is going to give him every chance to succeed because there isn't a better alternative. If you want me to give you an example, it's not totally apples to apples. But look at what happened at Colorado's former Big 12 rival over the last couple months, or the last couple years, excuse me, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Scott Frost literally got an extra year because he was Scott freaking Frost, the Nebraska legend. And I only bring it up to just say, it was so obvious from the Nebraska administration that they wanted him to work, that they gave him more opportunity, more leverage, more this, more that, because it was like, this guy's a legend. This guy played here. He's a Nebraska guy. We want this to work. Let's give him every opportunity. Now, it didn't, and it's not totally apples to apples because Coach Prime is obviously not a Colorado alum. But for Rick George, the AD, all his eggs are in the Prime basket right now. There is no plan B. There is no alternative. And again, any alternative is not going to be better than Coach Prime. So I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win at a high level. But even if he doesn't, he's going to get a longer leash than some other guy. If his name was Deion Jones and he was just the offensive coordinator from Alabama coming to be the head coach, I don't think he gets the wiggle room that Coach Prime Deion Sanders will. But Coach Prime Deion Sanders, again, has earned that equity with the interest and buzz that he's created around the program. Finally, the last part of the quote is like the most infuriating part to me. And that was this. Jackson State was so good because they got FBS level guys and beat on FCS level rosters. That won't happen here. They're not a good roster right now. How does he handle losing big? We haven't seen that. Let me start by saying this. I understand it's a rebuild. I understand it's a process. I understand that Colorado probably had the worst roster in Power 5 football last year. I don't believe they have the worst Power 5 football roster this year. Now, is it Alabama? Is it Georgia? Of course not. Is it even Oregon or USC at this point? It is not. But a couple things stand out. One, the roster is better than people give it credit for. Again, I've said this a million times. They have an NFL caliber quarterback. You have that, you're going to win games. I would argue, and I'm knee deep in my preseason prep, they have better skill position talent than just about everybody else in the Pac-12 right now, except maybe USC. USC's different level, Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, Caleb Williams, some great running backs, some great receivers, whatever. Now, admittedly, with Colorado, the defensive line isn't where it needs to be. The offensive line isn't where it needs to be. And because of that, they're not going to win 9 or 10 games this year. But the idea that they're not talented is silly. And the other idea that I just find so infuriating, this idea, he just had so much more talent at Jackson State, and that's why he won all those games. First of all, you go 23-3 over the course of a 2-year period. For people who do not know, Coach Prime's final 2 years at Jackson State, 11-2, 12-1, 23-3 overall. If you're not good at your job, you are not going 23-3 in your final 26 games as a head coach. And don't give me, he just had better players than everybody else. Did he have a lot of talent? He did. He's a great recruiter. And I understand he's going up against great recruiters, at least for now in the Pac-12, with Lincoln Riley at USC, Dan Lanning at Oregon, on and on down the list. And again, we'll see where Colorado ends up in a year, whether it's the Pac-12 or the Big 12. Same time. Can we stop with, he had so much more talent than everybody else he played? Now, yes, rosters are more talented here or there. But guess what? Jackson State, unless I missed something, wasn't the only program in the FCS that had access to the transfer portal. They weren't the only program that were able to flip their roster and bring in talent from the FBS level. Did they maybe get a few guys that other people couldn't because Coach Prime was their head coach? Of course. Travis Hunter, respectfully, probably wasn't going to a bunch of other HBCUs or FCS schools that weren't coached by Deion Sanders, that weren't coached by Coach Prime. But at the same time, don't tell me that he had so much more talent than everybody else. Very talented. That's what a good recruiter does. And we're going to now hold it against him that he's a very good recruiter. Beyond that, let's stop with the nobody else had talent except for him. Other schools had access to the transfer portal. Other guys got FBS transfers. Other guys got Power 5 transfers. Lastly, and I've said this a million times, the segment's going long, so I'll be quick. I know there is trepidation about, can this work? Will it work? It's a huge roster turnover. I've said it 100 times. Go back to year one, Jackson State, Barstool Sports did a documentary with Coach Prime on the Jackson State Tigers. Everything that Coach Prime is doing right now at Colorado, he did at Jackson State It was just that because it was the FCS, with no disrespect intended, not as many people paid attention, not as many people care. This ain't Coach Prime's first rodeo, and I believe he's going to have success, but these quotes were absolute nonsense.